you know?
Well, I needed attention and money, and I need to do songs.
Yeah.
I have songs I've been blessed to be able to play.
You know the songs. Everyday People. Dance to the Music. Family Affair. They weren't just hits, they were earthquakes that shook the foundation of pop music, leaving the landscape of funk, soul, and rock forever changed. The man at the center of it all was Sly Stone. A genius, a pioneer, a guy who put together a band that looked and sounded like the future, men, women, black, white, all on one stage, making one sound. He was a uniters. For every artist he inspired, there was another he apparently couldn't stand. Sly Stone's vision was so focused, so powerful, that anyone who got in its way, or worse, tried to copy it, risked his anger. We think we know the funk legend, the revolutionary in the psychedelic vest. But we don't know his enemies. Today, we're looking into the whispers, the rumors, and the behind-the-scenes stories to uncover the 6 musical forces that Sly Stone reportedly despised. These aren't just petty fights. They're clashes of ideas, battles for the soul of music, and betrayals that might have helped bring down one of music's greatest talents. You think you know Sly Stone? Let's see. Coming in at number 6, we have the titans of Motown themselves, the Temptations. Now, this wasn't a feud fought in the press. It was a cold war of musical philosophy, a quiet clash between the old guard and the new school. Think about the late 1960s. On one side, you have the Temptations, the perfect product of the Motown machine. They were flawless. Their harmonies were perfect, their dance moves were razor-sharp, and their suits were immaculate. They represented a very specific kind of black excellence, polished, professional, and designed to appeal to everyone, including mainstream white audiences. They were the establishment, and then, Sly and the family Stone came crashing in from the Bay Area. They were everything Motown wasn't. They were raw, chaotic, and totally unpredictable. Their stage was a riot of color, clashing patterns, afros, and fringe. Their music was a messy, beautiful mix of funk, rock, and psychedelia. And most radical of all, their lineup was a statement: black and white, men and women, playing together as a family. According to industry chatter, the tension started almost right away. The Temptations, who had spent years perfecting their act under Motown's strict rules, supposedly looked at Sly's explosive, improvisational shows with confusion. To them, it just looked sloppy. Whispers started going around, supposedly from the Motown camp, that Stone's performances were amateurish. For Sly, this wasn't just a critique of his show, it was a complete misunderstanding of his mission. He wasn't trying to be another Motown act, he was trying to tear up the Motown rulebook. He saw the perfection of groups like the Temptations as a creative prison. He felt their suits and synchronized steps catered to a system that wanted black artists to be neat, tidy, and non-threatening. As the civil rights movement gave way to the Black Power movement, Sly's music got more political. Songs like "Don't Call Me Nigger, Whitey" were a universe away from "My Girl." The story goes that Sly felt the Temptations, by sticking to love songs, were missing the point. He saw them as relics of an older time, holding back the future he was trying to build. The breaking point, according to the rumors, was when Sly heard that members of the Temptations were telling record execs his integrated band was just a publicity gimmick. For a man whose whole identity was built on unity, this was the ultimate insult. It reduced his family to a marketing trick. In private, Sly was reportedly furious. And it's here that the most famous, and most brutal, quote of this supposed feud comes from. He allegedly dismissed the Temptations as nothing more than Uncle Toms in matching suits. It was a harsh thing to say, but it showed how deep his conviction ran. To Sly, the Temptations weren't just musical rivals. They were symbols of a past he was determined to leave behind. At number 5, we have a rivalry born from being too similar. This was a dispute with Carlos Santana, and it was a bitter fight over credit, over who was the real pioneer of multicultural rock. In the late 60s, Sly Stone and Carlos Santana were both seen as visionaries coming out of the Bay Area. While Sly was mixing funk, rock, and soul with his integrated band, Santana was forging his own path, blending Latin rhythms and jazz into psychedelic rock. Both were celebrated for breaking down cultural barriers. On paper, they should have been allies, but according to sources close to Sly, he didn't see Santana as an ally. He saw him as a competitor who was getting praise for ideas Sly thought he'd pioneered first. The tension supposedly grew as critics constantly compared the two. Sly, the architect of his sound, felt his innovations in rhythm and production were more foundational. In his mind, he was building a new musical language from scratch, while Santana was just adding some Latin spice to an existing one. This resentment reportedly boiled over after their legendary sets at Woodstock in 1969. Both bands were incredible, but Santana's performance, especially Soul Sacrifice, became one of the festival's defining moments and launched them into global stardom. While the Family Stone was also praised, Santana's rise felt, to Sly, disproportionate. Those in Sly's circle claim he watched Santana's success with growing frustration. He reportedly felt that the credit for mixing rock with multicultural influences was all going to Santana. The joke in Sly's camp was that Santana's music was feel-good spiritual stuff for white hippies, while his own work was dealing with the gritty, uncomfortable truths of America. For Sly, it was about substance, and he felt the world was choosing the more digestible version. When Santana would talk in interviews about his music coming from higher consciousness, Sly supposedly scoffed, seeing it as a subtle dig at his own high-energy funk. The final straw allegedly came when a major festival chose Santana to headline over the Family Stone, reportedly seeing them as the safer and more reliable pick. This confirmed Sly's worst fears: the industry he was trying to shake up was still conservative. They preferred the marketable revolutionary to the real one. He reportedly told his team that Santana's music was fake spirituality for suburban crowds. In Sly's eyes, Santana hadn't just stolen his thunder, he'd watered down the entire revolution. Our number 4 spot takes us across the Atlantic for a feud that was less of a personal rivalry and more of a clash over cultural appropriation. And the band in Sly Stone's sights was one of the biggest in the world, Led Zeppelin. The tension seems to have started in the early 1970s. Led Zeppelin, who had built their empire on hard rock and blues, started bringing more obvious funk and soul into their sound. Songs like The Crunch were a clear nod to innovators like James Brown and Sly Stone. On the surface, it was just a band evolving. But from Sly's perspective, it was something else entirely. According to industry stories, Sly was irritated by Zeppelin's take on funk. He had meticulously built a new rhythmic world, and he saw Zeppelin's attempts as a clumsy imitation. The story goes that he felt Led Zeppelin was stealing black music and calling it innovation, boiling down the complex rhythms of funk into heavy-handed rock riffs. To him, they weren't creating a real fusion, they were just repackaging black music for a massive white audience. What made this so intense for Sly was the feeling of injustice. He reportedly believed that Led Zeppelin's huge success was built on the musical ideas that black artists had created but weren't getting paid or credited for. Every time a critic praised Zeppelin for a funky riff, it was, in Sly's view, another case of cultural theft being celebrated as genius. Sly allegedly grew to resent that Led Zeppelin's blues-based rock was treated as serious art, while his groundbreaking funk was often dismissed as just party music. He felt the music press only took black music seriously when it was filtered through white artists. The frustration reportedly boiled over when he learned a major festival had picked Zeppelin over the Family Stone, supposedly because Zeppelin was seen as a more traditional rock act. For Sly, this was proof of the industry's bias. He had helped invent funk rock, yet a band that borrowed from it was being treated as more authentic. He reportedly told his inner circle, "They only respect our music when someone else plays it." Led Zeppelin wasn't just another band to Sly, they were a symbol of a system that sidelined black creators while cheering for their imitators. We're halfway through our list, and it's clear Sly Stone's vision put him at odds with some of music's biggest names. Who do you think was right? Was Sly a purist defending his art, or were these bands just artists inspired by the sounds around them? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you're enjoying this, make sure to subscribe, because the rivalries we're about to cover get even more personal. At number 3, we have a feud that was deeply personal for Sly Stone. This was his rivalry with Earth, Wind and Fire, and it struck at the heart of his legacy. This was a battle for the soul of funk, a clash between the raw, revolutionary sound Sly had created and the polished, commercial juggernaut that EWF perfected. The rivalry is said to have ignited in the mid-70s, right when Earth, Wind and Fire was becoming one of the biggest bands in the world. With their huge stage shows and immaculately produced sound, EWF took the basics of funk and made them massively appealing. They were tight, uplifting, and brilliant. But for Sly Stone, who was deep in his own personal struggles and watching his career fade, their success felt like a slap in the face. Industry insiders claimed Sly felt Earth, Wind and Fire had taken his innovations and stripped out everything that made them important. He had created funk as a gritty, political expression. He reportedly complained that Maurice White and his band were turning his revolution into a Vegas show, sanitizing its message for the masses. Every horn stab and soaring harmony felt to Sly like another layer of commercial gloss hiding the raw truth he'd put on his records. As Earth, Wind and Fire racked up hits and Grammys, Sly felt they were getting the credit he deserved. The story goes that he told friends their success proved that audiences preferred fake depth over real innovation. He'd built the house of funk, and now he felt like he was watching someone else redecorate it and steal the deed. But what turned this into a deep, personal wound was what he saw as the ultimate betrayal. The breaking point, according to reports, came when Sly learned that some of his own former musicians, people from the legendary family Stone, had joined Earth, Wind and Fire's touring band. This was more than competition, this was treason. He allegedly heard they were not only playing with EWF but were bringing his arrangements and signature stage moves to their new band. For Sly, this was unthinkable. His sound, his musical DNA, was being handed over to the band he saw as his main rival. His paranoia went into overdrive. He reportedly told friends, "They're stealing my sound with my own people." The rivalry with Earth, Wind and Fire became a painful symbol of his own decline. As their star rose, his fell, and in his mind, the two were directly connected. At number 2, we have a rival that wasn't a band at all. This was Sly's ideological war with the Black Panther Party. They weren't competing for fans, they were fighting for control over Sly's message and the identity of his band. In the late 60s, Sly and the family Stone were a cultural phenomenon. Their integrated lineup was a powerful symbol of racial harmony, the living embodiment of everyday people. But the Black Panther Party had a different vision for a powerful black artist like Sly. They saw his platform as a weapon to be used for black liberation. As the band got bigger, members of the Panthers began pressuring Sly to make his music more militant and political, but their demands went further. The biggest point of conflict was the family Stone itself. The Panthers demanded that Sly fire the two white members of his band, saxophonist Jerry Martini and drummer Greg Errico. They believed a band led by a powerful black man should be an all-black group. They also demanded he fire his white manager. This wasn't a polite request. According to the band members themselves, the Panthers' methods were aggressive and intimidating. They would show up at rehearsals and concerts, delivering threats. For Sly, who built his world on different strokes for different folks, this was an impossible demand. He was being pressured to dismantle his own family. To his credit, Sly refused. He would not fire his bandmates. Jerry Martini later recalled how Sly always stood up for him and Greg Errico, putting himself in harm's way to protect them. But the war of ideologies took a heavy toll. The constant pressure fueled the paranoia that was already consuming him. He felt trapped between his record label, which wanted pop hits, and the Panthers, who wanted a political mouthpiece. The conflict spilled into his public life. In July 1970, the band was scheduled to play in Chicago. Sly, increasingly paranoid, was a no-show. A riot broke out in the restless crowd. The title of his next album, the masterpiece of paranoid funk There's a Riot Goin' On, was a direct response to this incident and the pressures closing in on him. The Black Panther Party wasn't a musical rival, but their battle with Sly left deep scars, pushing him further into the isolation that would define the final chapter of his career. We've arrived at number 1. This wasn't a rivalry with an outsider. This was the feud that destroyed the family stone from within. It was a civil war that pitted brother against brother and a visionary against his own creation. The biggest rival Sly Stone ever faced was his own band, with the conflict centered on his brilliant and estranged bassist, Larry Graham. Larry Graham wasn't just the bass player, he was a revolutionary. He invented the thumpin' and pluckin' slap bass technique, a style that changed music forever. In the early days, his chemistry with Sly was electric. But as the band got more famous, problems grew. Drug use was everywhere, egos got bigger, and a deep friction developed between Sly and Larry. It was a power struggle. Sly was the leader, but Larry was a powerful talent in his own right. As Sly became more erratic from drug use, Larry reportedly tried to keep the band professional, which only created more tension. But things got much worse. Sly brought in a new entourage, including a pimp named Hamp Bubba Banks who acted as his bodyguard. This crew created a toxic, violent atmosphere. In this poisonous environment, the feud turned dangerous. Rumors started flying. Sly, lost in paranoia, supposedly became convinced that Larry was trying to take over the band or even have him killed. In turn, Larry Graham started to fear for his own safety, worried that one of Sly's armed hangers-on would act on the leader's paranoid fantasies. The conflict exploded after a concert in 1972. A vicious fight broke out between Sly's crew and Larry Graham's. It was the final, violent end of their relationship. The story is that Graham and his wife had to climb out of their hotel room window to escape. That was it. Larry Graham quit the band he helped build. His departure was a blow the family stone never recovered from. But for Sly, the paranoia only got worse. After losing trust in his most important partner, he started suspecting everyone, including his own family members. He believed they were sabotaging shows and stealing his ideas. He retreated into the studio, often recording entire albums by himself with a drum machine because he no longer trusted other musicians. The dark, murky sound of There's a Riot Goin' On is the sound of that isolation. It's the sound of a man who has lost faith in his own family. Sly Stone, the man who gave the world anthems of togetherness, ended up a lonely king on a crumbling throne, seeing enemies in the faces of the people who helped make him great. The ultimate band Sly Stone hated was the one he could no longer trust, his OWN.SO. There you have it. From the polished sound of the Temptations to the raw power of Led Zeppelin, from the ideological pressure of the Black Panthers to the heartbreaking betrayal inside his own band, the story of Sly Stone's rivalries is as complex and tragic as the man himself. These weren't just arguments. They were clashes over what music should be, the price of fame, and the struggle for authenticity in an industry that often prefers a good copy to the real thing. Sly Stone built his career on a vision of unity, but he spent most of it fighting battles, both real and imagined, that ultimately pushed him into exile. His story is a powerful reminder of how a brilliant artist, consumed by pressure, paranoia, and betrayal, can be brought down. He showed us a glimpse of a more unified world, but he couldn't escape the divisions that tore his own apart. What do you think? Were these feuds just the result of a genius who refused to compromise, or were they the tragic symptoms of a man spiraling out of control? Let us know in the comments. And for more stories behind the music you love, don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.